We talk a lot about strategy, about coordination, about collective impact. But here's the question we don't ask often enough. Do we actually share the same values? Because here's the truth. You can build the most detailed homelessness plan. You can design high-functioning governance tables. You can have millions in funding lined up. But if the organizations involved don't hold shared values, you'll have alignment on paper and disarray in practice. One outreach team is focused on housing, another on only meeting basic needs. One shelter bends over backwards to lower barriers, another enforces curfews like it's military training. One system listens to people with lived experience, another puts them on stage for 10 minutes, then moves on with the real meeting. And then we wonder why it's so hard to get traction. When service providers, funders, and systems don't share values, things fall apart. Sometimes quietly, often gradually, and almost always deeply. Here's what that misalignment can look like. Working at cross purposes, things like a case manager doing everything to secure housing, while a partner agency is focused on rule enforcement, not stability. Or things like gatekeeping versus access. One provider embraces harm reduction, another insists on sobriety. One says yes, the other says, prove you're ready. Fragmentation of care. A person receives conflicting messages depending on which door they walk through. Or things like tokenism. A lived experience advisor group that's thanked, applauded, and then ignored. The result? Confused recipients of services, frustrated staff, burnout, bureaucracy, and a deeply fragmented system that isn't bad at housing people because it lacks heart. It's bad at housing people because it lacks alignment. Let me put it plainly. If your community isn't clear on what it stands for, do not expect the system to stand strong. So what kind of values should communities aligned around? Let me give you a working list, not as commandments, but as conversation starters. Some variation of these values I believe are essential in most communities if you actually want to move the needle on homelessness. Number one, housing is a human right. Everyone deserves a safe, stable place to live. No exceptions, no preconditions. Two, people with lived experience are co-designers, not tokens. People with lived experience shape decisions, not just stories. They're in the room, not just on the brochure. Three, voluntary engagement and autonomy matter. People don't need to be ready. They need to be respected. Services should meet people where they're at, not where they wish they were. 4, support, not surveillance. Care is not control. Helping someone doesn't mean managing their every move. 5, cultural safety and equity are not optional. This is especially true for Indigenous people, Black people, and 2S LGBTQIA+ people, and disabled communities who are dramatically overrepresented in homelessness. 6, trauma-informed care is foundational. People experiencing homelessness have often survived violence, loss, and systemic failure. Our services must avoid re-traumatization. They must emphasize emotional safety, and they have to build trust over time. 7, progressive engagement leads to better outcomes. Start with the lightest touch support necessary and build intensity based upon need and interest. People do not need to prove they deserve help. They need help that scales with them. 8, use a strengths-based approach. Too often, systems are built around deficits and problems. A strengths-based model recognizes people's capabilities, resilience, and potential, even when they're struggling. 9, nonjudgmental service is essential. Moralizing people's decisions never helped anyone exit homelessness. Judgment builds walls, whereas curiosity and compassion build bridges. People should feel safe accessing help, no matter what brought them there. 10. Data should be used for people, not against them. We don't collect information to gatekeep. We collect it to improve outcomes and inform policy. 11. Recovery is not linear. Relapse is not failure. Missed appointments are not disrespect. Setbacks are not disqualifiers. They're just life. 12. Everything should drive toward housing. If a program or policy isn't contributing to housing outcomes, we need to ask why it exists. These values are not radical. They're realistic. And in communities where they are aligned, housing outcomes improve. Trust builds. The system begins to feel coherent. Because values are not a mission statement. They're a filter. They shape how we make decisions, who we fund, what we prioritize, and how we show up. Let's talk about one value in particular: engagement with people who've experienced homelessness. We throw around the words lived experience like it's seasoning. Sprinkle a few folks into a meeting, call it co-design, and move on. But real engagement is not performative. It's not 15 minutes at the top of the agenda. It's not, we consulted the community last year. It's not inviting someone to speak, then ignoring everything they said because it's inconvenient to the funders. If lived experience isn't built into governance, design, and evaluation, then we're still designing services for people, not with people. And that's a value gap. Performative engagement is often a red flag for deeper misalignment. Because if we're pretending to include people while still controlling the decisions, we've replaced humility with ego. And systems change has been replaced with symbolism. So what can communities do? Start with this. Talk about your values. Out loud. On purpose. With everyone in the room. You'd be surprised, maybe, how often agencies assume they share the same values until someone actually asks. Run a workshop. Hold a facilitated dialogue. Ask tough questions like, do we believe housing should be unconditional? Or do we agree on the role of shelters and outreach and day services? Or are we aligned on how we engage people with lived experience? Or are we okay with risk, with failure, with second chances? You don't need perfect agreement, but you do need enough agreement to move together. Because in this work, alignment is not about slogans, it's about traction. Without shared values, collaboration is just choreography. With shared values, it's movement. So here's your challenge. If you're part of a homelessness response system, ask yourself, what do we really stand for? And does everyone else in the system know it? Because aligned values create aligned action. And aligned action is what ends homelessness. Thanks for watching, folks. If this resonates, share it with your network. Add some ideas on other values that should be considered in community conversations in the comments, and let's keep the dialogue going.